The Unyielding Flame, a tale of mind, honesty, and discipline. In the bustling coastal town of Eldridge, where the salty breeze whispered secrets to the waves crashing against jagged rocks, lived a young fisherman named Elias. At 25, Elias was a man of raw potential, his broad shoulders honed by years of hauling nets under the relentless sun. His eyes, the color of storm-tossed seas, held a spark that could light up the dimmest dawn. But beneath that spark lay a shadow, a restless mind that wandered like a ship without a rudder, chasing fleeting dreams and dodging the anchors of reality. Elias's days began with promise. He'd rise before the first blush of sunrise, his small wooden boat bobbing eagerly in the harbor. Today, he'd muttered to himself, fists clenched against the chill, "Today, I'll bring in the biggest haul yet. I'll save enough to buy that bigger vessel, escape this endless cycle of dawn to dusk drudgery." Yet, as the oars dipped into the ink-black water, his thoughts would betray him. Why bother, they'd sneer. The sea's too vast, the fish too clever. Remember last week's storm? You nearly drowned for a handful of mackerel. Doubt crept in like fog, thickening until his strokes grew lazy, his focus shattered. By midday, he'd return with barely enough to feed his widowed mother and himself, his pockets as empty as his resolve. The townsfolk whispered about him. "Elias has the strength of 10 men," old Captain Harrow would grumble over his pipe at the Salted Anchor Tavern. "But his mind's a wild colt, no reins, no direction." Elias heard the words, felt their sting like salt in a fresh cut, but instead of facing them, he'd drown them in cheap ale. One evening, after a particularly meager catch, he slumped at the bar, nursing a mug that blurred the edges of his failures. Beside him sat Mira, the sharp-eyed herbalist from the cliffs, her hands stained green from grinding roots and her voice steady as the tide. "You're wasting away, Elias," she said, not unkindly, sliding a steaming cup of her bitter tea toward him. "Not your body, your spirit. It's like watching a flame flicker in the wind, so close to snuffing out." He laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "Easy for you to say. You peddle weeds and whispers. I fight the ocean every day, and for what? A life of scraping by?" Mira's gaze pierced him unyielding. "The ocean doesn't break you, Elias. Your mind does. It whispers lies when you need truth, scatters your focus when you need steel. Control it, or it'll control you." Her words lodged in his chest like a hook, pulling at something deep. That night, as rain lashed his thatched roof, Elias couldn't sleep. He paced the creaking floorboards, the storm outside mirroring the one within. "She's right," he admitted to himself, the honesty of the thought burning like swallowed coals. For the first time, he confronted the web of excuses he'd spun. The laziness masked as fatigue, the fear disguised as fate. Honesty was a blade, sharp and unforgiving, but in its cut lay clarity. "No more," he vowed, clenching his jaw until his teeth ached. "I will master this chaos in my head." Dawn broke gray and unforgiving, but Elias rose not with groggy reluctance, but with purpose. He began with discipline's simplest thread, a routine carved in stone. No longer would he linger in bed, bargaining with the alarm of his internal clock. At precisely 4:00 a.m., he was up, splashing cold water on his face until his skin tingled awake. Breakfast was sparse, oatmeal and black tea, no indulgences to dull the edge. As he rowed out, he introduced a new anchor, breath. When doubts slithered in, "The wind's against you today," he paused, inhaled deeply through his nose, held it for a count of 4, then exhaled slowly, visualizing the thoughts as dark clouds parting for sun. "Focus on the net," he'd command himself. One cast at a time. His mind, once a battlefield of distractions, became a forge where he hammered distractions into tools. But discipline demanded more than rituals. It required honesty in the face of temptation. A week into his transformation, the sea turned traitor. A squall brewed on the horizon, black as ink, and Elias's old instincts screamed to turn back. Safe harbor, they urged. Live to fish another day. His boat rocked violently, spray stinging his eyes and fear clawed at his throat. In that moment, alone with the roar of waves, he could have lied to himself. This isn't worth it, you're not strong enough, and retreated, preserving the illusion of caution. Instead, he gripped the oars tighter, his knuckles white as bone. Honest, now, he growled through gritted teeth. You're scared, yes. The sea's merciless, but turning back feeds the lie that you're weak. Push through, and you prove otherwise. He breathed, deep and deliberate, letting the rhythm ground him. The storm battered him for hours, soaking him to the marrow, but he cast his nets into the churning depths, hauling them with arms that screamed in protest. When the clouds finally parted, golden light spilling across the water like spilled treasure, his nets brimmed with silver-scaled bounty, the richest haul of his life. Word spread through Eldridge like wildfire. Elias returned not as the drifting dreamer, but as a force tempered by fire. He paid off debts long ignored, bought provisions for his mother, and even shared his surplus with the struggling families in the harbor. But the true victory was invisible, the quiet command he held over his thoughts. No longer did whims dictate his path. He chose it, step by deliberate step. Months later, under a canopy of stars that mirrored the constellations in his newly steady mind, Elias sat with Mira on the cliffs. The town below twinkled like a lantern-lit promise. "You were right," he said, his voice low and sure. "The power isn't in the muscles or the luck. It's in corralling the wild horse of your thoughts. Honesty strips away the illusions. Discipline builds the fences. Together, they turn a spark into an unyielding flame." Mira smiled, her eyes reflecting the sea's calm. "And that flame, it doesn't just warm you, Elias. It lights the way for others." From that day forward, Elias's boat grew into a fleet, his name a beacon for the lost. But he never forgot the lesson etched into his soul. The mind is a kingdom, vast and untamed. Conquer it with honesty as your crown and discipline as your scepter, and no storm, be it of sea or self, can dim your light. And so, in the heart of every striving soul, remember Elias. Control your mind, embrace the truth, and wield discipline like an oar through tempests. For in that mastery lies not just survival, but the extraordinary life you were born to claim.